Hello friends, welcome back to Value Vintage Cards. This video is going to be a little bit of a shout out, inspired, and recommendation of two new channels. I don't believe I've mentioned either one, and I think both are worth everyone taking a moment and checking out. So I'm going to show a couple of cards inspired by those channels, and hopefully everyone gets a chance to jump over there, subscribe, and follow along in their journeys that they're sharing. And then the other part is talking about a question that I've been kind of texting back and forth with a couple different threads, but wanted to throw my 2 cents in on the challenge of trying to value something that is extremely rare, low population, low transactions, however you want to kind of look at that, but just something that, we all talk about like comps, and I always default to 64 top something easy to comp, something that has a pop of 64 instead of being from 1964. A little bit tougher. You might have 2 or 3 sales a year. You might have, I have cards that have 2 or 3 sales. So when you start looking at that, it is pretty challenging to figure out the right formula and what's fair. So I'm going to chat a little bit about that in just a moment. So I will flip it around and we'll check things out. All right, friends. First up, I think this should be a giveaway as to whose channel I'm going to mention here, but our friend, the Phil Niekro collector. So Phil Niekro is honestly one of the more underrated players. When you look at his WAR, his ERA, his career, durability, obviously his pitching style was, somewhat favorable to being durable, but you still got to be able to get out there. I mean, calf pulls and Achilles and, forget the Tommy John surgeries. Like there's lots of ways for a pitcher to be injured when you're playing for that long. But I thought I'd share this one as a good representative of something that might be interesting to our friend, the Phil Niekro collector. This is actually a squared off proof, so it's a blank back instead of being, I think the supers, I think this is a 70, if I recall. I think I actually have the actual super too. This was just one I had somewhat close by, not crazy expensive. I think the 69 top supers are the big buck, holy cow, I can't believe you found one kind of thing. This one was not big dollars, but everything about it seemed to be authentic and good, and it's didn't even cost dozens of dollars, so I can't even use my dozens of dollars phrase. But definitely want to give a shout out to his channel. His collecting is, there's some Phil Niekro in there, but there's some sets, there's some player, there's some different focuses that might be of interest to different folks. One of them he just showed, and he actually shouted out both myself and my good friend Jason for having a little bit of, we'll keep it as inspiration and not influence. But we're always happy to recommend, and if it spurs some interest and leads you to heading out and finding something, that's really neat. This is the set. Now, everyone's probably somewhat familiar with this from us showing, and I'll just say us because Jason and I both show these pretty regularly. So he picked up one. It was a player that's not necessarily a huge name, but it is a amazing image, and anything from that set really. Some of it you'll collect because of who it is. You may or may not like the image necessarily, and others you'll just see and think like, my gosh, that's photography. Just beautifully done. So you may jump in and grab it for that reason. So this is a Luke Appling. Most of them are going to be type 1s. This is a type 2. I think there's 3, 4, 5, if I recall. I think one of them, I want to say 3 maybe, is the one that's not necessarily any big players that are on my list. Maybe it's 4. Maybe I'm reversing that. But this Luke Appling, I tried to look it up this morning. When I showed this, Jason's like, I haven't seen that one. This might be really scarce and tough. I looked on SGC, the trouble with trying to do populations, and I always warn people of this when you're looking at something that's scarce and rare, which is a little bit of a theme of this. make sure you're looking at like the big dog in the set. Make sure you're looking at the Ruth Cobb Mantle Maze kind of, you know, equivalent to really get a judgment for how many might be out there. It's kind of dangerous to use Luke Appling as your, you know, measuring stick of how many are in the population, because this is still a card that is, you know, dozens of dollars, as I say. So it's not enormous dollars. This went stronger than I expected, and I'm actually glad that I ended up winning it, because if it really is that scarce, I mean, from what I could tell, SGC's graded like 2 and PSA's graded a couple. So I don't know if it is truly that tough to come by, but it is definitely one I haven't seen for sale and available often. So if anybody has more insight on this when you get into these different types, please do share. I think the imagery, and that's what most people really have commented on and said, is just amazing. I like Luke Appling as it is. He's a, you know, very underrated Hall of Famer. You know, White Sox star, of course. I feel like the clip I see most of him is an old timers game. He was like, I don't know, 70 or 80 or something like that, and he had a home run. So it's pretty ridiculous how talented these guys are. I probably had a ball, you know, probably went and got like some oxygen and a cane and hit a ball still farther than I can in my prime. So the amount of talent these guys have is just phenomenal. But those two I thought were a good representation. So please go check out Phil Niekro Fan channel. The other channel I'm going to shout out along the way here is Reverend Steve's Cards. It's been a phenomenal part of the community, just always, you know, commenting, supporting, encouraging, you know, just, I always say, like, just good dude. And that's what we need more of in the community. There's many, but there's always room for another great person to know in your community. So I'm going to share a couple. One of the things he does that I think is fun, and being a player collector, this just is right up my alley. And what he does is he shares kind of his Hall of Fame binders. So he's going through and showing his player runs, and some of them he's got pretty extensive, and some of them he's got, you know, just a few, and he's getting the collection going for a certain player. But I thought I'd show a couple with the mindset of things that are a little bit tougher, a little less often seen. This is a 1979 Hostess Ozzie Smith. They are out there. It's an interesting set because there's some cards in that set. I believe Dale Murphy cost me more than Ozzie Smith, and it's just because of rarity scarcity, not because, obviously, I mean, 79 would be an Ozzie Smith rookie, right? And that's a third-year Dale Murphy. So logically, if it was tops, that wouldn't make sense. But when you start to factor in how tough it is to find, that becomes a significant part of the equation. But this one's in a 1. These are all hand cut, so really, I mean, to me, they should probably all be authentics. But this one is, if I get in really close, you can start to see there's some significant handling, some creasing. Maybe they were, I don't know how they had to cut this off of the package. I mean, maybe they were just bending it up to get it cut out. Maybe they took good care of it once it was cut out. Not sure. But I did want to share that one. I thought that was a good representation, and that's a good player that he shared recently. So go check out his video. And another player that he shared recently that goes really well along those lines, Stretch. It's got to be tough when you're the second most famous Willie M on your team, and you're still a Hall of Famer and MVP and Rookie of the Year. And, you know, like, that's just 500 home run club. All these things that McCovey accomplished, but with Mays next to him, he's definitely the less collected, less known, less famous of the Willie M's from the Giants era. But this one is a 1961 Manny's Land. This is another set that I feel like I see going all over the darn place. When you get it in nice condition, they can go for big bucks. And when you get it like this one might have been like $12 or something, which I think was a phenomenal deal if I'm seeing other sales properly. This one is enormous and extremely oversized, so I really can't do a whole lot to bring it up to the screen. Maybe you can see the very top corner here, there's a little pinhole, I think. Yeah. Looks like it goes through. They're blank back. Sometimes on these, and it looks like it's got it on the bottom too. I think that might be a pinhole. Yeah, the only way to really know is to flip it over and look. I mean, that's how insignificant it is. But for me, really cool image. 1961, so 60 tops would be his rookie tops card. So getting something like this is definitely a very early career and something that, again, isn't often seen. It's definitely, this is like an 8x10 size item. So if you're going to have that on display somewhere, you know, find a good shelf, find somewhere it can sit out and be appreciated. But you'll probably see this behind me in a future video. I've got a whole stack of Manny's Land, so I'll rotate those through just to keep it fun. But this all kind of culminates, you know, looking at the way our Niekro Fan and Reverend Steve both collect. I think they collect, you know, both things you might see every day, and they're getting into some stuff that's also pretty tough to find, which is fun. So I was messaging with a couple of friends, actually. One of them was Trevor, and another couple of friends that we have an ongoing discussion on this. And this is the one that's really inspired by Doug, who's just a phenomenal mentor / bad influence for me. But this is one of the absolute toughest. You know, there's been a few cards, and I will say Dan has been phenomenal. Vintage PC, he's always reaching out and saying, like, did you see this one? Are you going to go for it? And a lot of times these cards are going, you know, when they're a pop 6, a pop 8, we kind of look at it and say it's worth X, and then you see it's going for like 2.5X, and you're like, well, oof, okay. I thought it was a big card, and it's a monster card. At least today it is. And it gets to the topic of, like, how do you value something that is going to be extremely scarce, extremely rare, extremely tough. And this card, to the best of my knowledge, I did see there was another discovery of another 50 cards. This was not in it. So I believe the population on this one sits at 2. It looks just like an E121, which is a fantastic set. Absolutely love it. Let's see if I can pull an Orlando here and zoom a little bit without it going crazy on me. And I'll hold this one up too, because it is a really neat one. But this is a 1921 Herpelsheimer. So Doug has done some fantastic videos on this issue set, why it's, you know, so tough to find. You look at the grading number. This one was sent in fairly recently. So prior to this sale, which was in the last couple months, gosh, how fast is time going? Maybe it was just last month. Maybe it was a couple weeks ago. It's pretty recent. But before that, and this one being sent in for grading, which had to have been recent based on that serial number there was one. And it did sell at, I forget, maybe Mile High, at the end of 2023 for probably 50% more than I paid for this one. And if you know the set, it was a 2 with a qualifier. So it was a decent shape, but had a little bit of mark on the back, which is extremely common for, especially like what was known to be out there prior to these last couple of finds. So this one being found and being graded and apparently not having a mark, at least I haven't found it, and maybe they're right, maybe they looked at it close enough, hopefully they did. But it has a grading of 4.5. So to go from a 2Q to a 4.5, and maybe some awareness of this set growing, I had no idea where this was going to sell. You know, if you see it going for $100 and then you see this come up and you're thinking like, well, geez, is that going to go for $500 or is it going to go for 90 because now the population doubled and people care about it less? I don't know. But it went for definitely, you know, much less than I expected. I was prepared to go up a little bit if I had to. And of course I didn't want to. But oh my gosh, see that? I guess there's your argument to slab it. Whew. All right. I'm glad that was recorded. I don't do baggies. I don't do any of that stuff either. I do not I want to be able to see my card as well as I can. So let me get you in close on that. So 21 Herpelsheimer. This gives me one more chance to drop it, right? What the heck? All right, so super cool. It's just like an E121. Set it down a little bit better, my golly. But the back of it being so unique and so interesting is what makes this to be kind of super extra collectible. It's definitely a multiple of the E121. So my approach is always figure out what like an E121 is worth. That's a set that, you know, has basically the same era, same player list, everything else. And then I start comparing. So I say, well, if a Sisler goes for this, but there's no sales, who else is similar in that set? You know, has a Tris speaker sold? Maybe, you know, look at somebody that sells for consistently, you know, 3 or 4 times and look at like Ty Cobb and say, okay, well, the most recent Cobb sold for X, and the most recent Sisler sold for, you know, X divided by 4. And then I kind of transfer that valuation over to another set. Sometimes that's impossible, like I mentioned with the, you know, Ozzie Smith, Dale Murphy situation with Hostess. Sometimes a set will have, you know, just random scarcity and you have to get to know the set a little more intimately. Other times it works pretty gosh darn well. You know, you can look at T206 and compare it to an E93 series or something like that and say like, well, it's same player, same ratio. This one sells for double what that guy does. That seems to make sense. And maybe that works. But in this case, between scarcity, lack of sales, everything else, you know, as John Mancini has told me, pay what you think is fair, and if you want it, go get it. So, you know, it's kind of the advice of don't pass on it. This was one that I knew if I miss this, it's gone. There's 2. You know, so what do, right? Either you go strong and you put it in your collection, you say, I have it, or you say, I didn't want to make that commitment and decided to, you know, go buy something different and hold off and, you know, save for next show or whatever it may be. But for me, if I had gone to the National or if I was saving for Strongsville or anything else, like when this kind of thing pops up, it's you get it now or you never have it. Like quite literally, this card is not for sale for the next however many years I'm alive. So somebody's going to have some really nice George Sisler options whenever my kids decide to move on from my collection because I don't think they have interest in it. So, yeah, that'll be a time for collectors to dive in and get some cool stuff. But until then, this is out of circulation. But that is, I kind of wanted to just bring that topic up a little bit, and I thought it related really well. 2 awesome channels. Please dive in. Please check out Phil Niekro and Reverend Steve. I think both of them have a lot of just joy for the hobby, and that's really what I look for. And they both collect in different ways, similar to what I do. At least little corners of my collecting style is definitely found on their channels, and that's why I enjoy watching them. And they both seem like just fantastic people. So that's what I have for today. I'd be really curious how you guys try and value things that are anywhere from less often seen to something like this Herpelsheimer, where it's literally never seen and won't be seen again. So how do you slap a value on that? Feel free to comment, and heck, you know, I don't really do like the VR thing, but I think it's a fantastic topic if somebody wants to just share, you know, record your thoughts on how do you value something that's truly rare, scarce, unique, or at least extremely tough to comp. So looking forward to all your feedback and thoughts. Appreciate y'all. Have a good one.